Welcome to the J&J Show. I'm Jeff, he's Jerry, and tonight is, I think, with the war breaking out in Israel, Jerry, it's pretty obvious what we're going to be talking about tonight.
Yeah.
And it's the end of days and the imminent return of Jesus. It's like we say, this is going to be part 7 of that series. And it's like we say at the end of every one of those episodes. As we're recording this, something's probably going to happen tomorrow that's going to bring us right back to it. And obviously, the war in Israel
Yeah,
is a big
that's right.
thing that cannot be ignored, and it's something that we feel like we need to discuss. But with everything that's been going on, excuse me, in recent years, with prophecy starting to come true, and those that are about to come true, and the signs and the stars and the heavens, and everything that has been said about the second coming of Jesus in the end of days is starting to happen. Everything the Bible says, which has proven the Bible to be true, it proves that God exists, it proves that Jesus is the Son of God, and it proves that his second coming is imminent. And it just, we need to be filled with, I don't want to get off topic, but we need to be filled with that sense of urgency, and we need to be out there spreading the word. And, that's what this series is all about. The end of days and the imminent return of Jesus is us trying to wake people up and instill that sense of urgency in them. And, excuse me, allergies always start with me
Right.
when as soon as I hit that record button. But you know, everything that's been happening lately in recent years is it's got that feel to it, But this war in Israel that's breaking out, we've talked about it before, how it was imminent, how it was about to happen. Israel's been surrounded. It's just a powder keg ready to blow over there, and it finally did.
Right.
It just feels different than everything else that's been happening. And we talk about God speaking to us in various ways, and one of the ways He speaks to us is putting the right verse in front of us at the right time. And I'm sure I've talked about this before on this channel. If not, I'll be scrolling through social media, Instagram, and I'll have something on my mind, and all of a sudden, I'm scrolling. I follow a lot of Christian accounts on there. The perfect verse at the exact right time pops up, and that's just a coincidence. It's just one account putting up a verse. Well, I start to see that verse over and over. And then I'll start to see other verses that relate to that verse. And they're all connected. And it all seems to be pointing to what I'm going through. So that's just one of the many ways God speaks to us. Excuse me. I'll turn over to you here in a minute if I can't get my allergies under control. But I was doing just that. I was scrolling through social media the other day, right after all of this started to happen, and verses were put in front of me. And I do not think it's a coincidence. We've talked many times about how we don't believe in coincidence. And, we have this channel, we have this topic. This is part 7 of that topic. These verses were not put in front of me by accident. I saw them. It was meant for me to see them. I fully believe that. And ever since I've seen them, I've had that sense of urgency to talk about this, and I wanted to start recording with you as soon as possible on this topic. But these verses that I'm talking about is Luke 21:20 through 28. And there are certain verses that the account I saw post them picked out, and they were talking about how it relates to the war in Israel. And, you know, I'm not going to talk about all 8 verses or 9 verses, 8 verses, 9 verses, but there are certain ones I want to talk about. They are worth the read. Is Jesus's words, and I love when I read my Bible and I turn to a certain verse, or if I'm in a certain book and I start to see those red letters coming. I absolutely love that. I love seeing the red letters coming because I know it's Jesus and I know it's Him talking, and that's what these verses are. They're red letters, and it's Jesus talking. So this isn't coming from me; it's coming from Jesus Himself, because obviously those red letters. Um, but there are 3 or 4 verses I want to point out, and we'll get into that. Did you want to weigh in on on this first before we get into those, or?
No, just I was eager to hear what you what you're describing is important. The experience you've had is important, because when it comes to prophecy, that's one of the main ways that we hear from the Lord, is what you're describing. You come across verses, and they really have an impact on your thinking and your feeling, and the fact that it's important for us to be humble when we're studying prophecy, and to be malleable. In other words, to allow the Lord. So many people come in with their own agendas, and the Lord just doesn't really bless that. So it's just interesting that um, I'm not all you.
All right. Yeah, and it's like, it's also that gift of discernment. You see a certain verse and it just hits you out of nowhere, and you know that you're supposed to be seeing this, and it all makes sense at the time, and that's all the gift of discernment. But the first verse I wanted to look at in these, excuse me, bad episode for me to be leading one with my allergies today, apparently. But no, is actually Luke 21 verse 20, and it says, when you see Jerusalem being surrounded by armies, you will know that its desolation is near. And I know it's not Jerusalem specifically that's surrounded right now; it's Israel, but Jerusalem is in Israel, and this verse to me, Israel's been surrounded by armies for a few years now, right? This conflict has been ramping up for a few years now, and this verse is just its desolation is near, and then the war starts, and I fully, maybe they will move through Israel to Jerusalem. Maybe they will eventually have Jerusalem surrounded, but I just you just can't ignore it, because it is Israel that
That's
is,
right.
where the fighting started. It is Israel that's surrounded, and Jerusalem is in Israel. It's the city of God. So, um, now I think that one pretty much speaks for itself. And the next one that I wanted to look at was verse 23. And this one is just sickening what's happening there. But this one, verse 23 reads, "How dreadful it will be in those days for pregnant women and nursing mothers." And then the rest of that verse reads, "There will be great distress in the land and wrath against this people." And how else can you describe what's happening other than wrath against the people? And with
Yeah.
what's been going on against the women and children there, and I don't know if we want to get into too much detail about that,
Right.
because it's very disturbing. It's sickening what's going on there and what's happening, especially to the children. But these mothers and these children have been pulled out of their homes, and horrific things beyond just being killed is happening to them, and it's bad, and it's really bad, and it just feeds into the next verse, which is people will faint. No, that's not it.
24 probably.
Yeah, it is. They will fall by the sword and will be taken prisoners to all the nations, which is what's happening. And Jerusalem will be trampled on by the Gentiles, which is, what they are, what these armies are. They are the Gentiles until the time of the Gentiles are fulfilled. But there was another one in here. I thought it talked about. There it is. I found it. Okay, so 25 says, "There will be signs in the sun, moon, and stars," which there have been. "On the earth, nations will be in anguish and perplexity at the roaring and tossing of the sea." And we've talked about before how the sea, when we think sea, we think of water and waves and the ocean.
Right.
But one way this could be taken is people. The sea could
Totally.
mean people. And
Totally.
there has been a huge uproar, especially here in the US, regarding what's going on over there and this war, and people taking sides, and people supporting Palestine, others supporting Israel. And we've seen our issues over here. We've seen our social justice moments where people take sides on issues, politicians, people take sides. Everything's been very, very divisive in recent years, and it's been an uproar of people of the sea. But this, again, like I said before, with the war starting in Israel just feeling different, this just feels different. People are outraged on both sides of this, and they're just at each other's throats. And it just, I don't know, this to me just is I believe this is the start of that verse, of that prophecy, of what Jesus said here with the roaring of the sea. It's been going on for a while, but like I said, this just feels different to me for some reason. Maybe it's that gift of discernment through the Holy Spirit that I've received. Maybe it's God, just letting me know this is different. This is the beginning of the end. And that kind of ties into verse 28, which is the last one. Um, when these things begin to take place, stand up and lift up your heads, because your redemption is drawing near.
That's the key verse right there.
That's it. And lift up your heads, look to the skies. And it doesn't mean walk around staring up at the sky all day.
Right,
It
sure.
just you know you need to be ready, because you need to be aware, and you need to be watching. And that's what we do here. That's what Jerry and I, we self-proclaimed watchers. This We pay attention to this stuff, and everything that's been happening, like I said in the intro, in the recent years, has caught my attention. But nothing's really caught my attention like this war starting. And I don't know. It just makes me want to watch that much more. Lift my head up and look.
It's the table is set. I think that's one of the things too that has got so many people's attention that watch prophecy, is that there is so much here that we could talk about. You have Luke, Matthew, and Mark all have sections where Jesus sits down and talks with the disciples about what to expect and what to look for in the end. You could spend a lifetime just studying those. Then you have the entire book of Revelation, which is extremely relevant. And then you have Second Thessalonians, which has a lot about the rapture. And then you have one that a lot of people have been talking about this week, in the past week, that gets forgotten, but has really come up. And that is Ezekiel 38 and 39, to be more specific. You really can't separate the two. It's Ezekiel chapter 38 and Ezekiel chapter 39. And the reason why that's so important is because in that chapter, it describes an attack on Israel in the latter days. And the nations that are named in that chapter are the exact nations that are arrayed against Israel right now, down to the T. Most notably, the big four in there that Ezekiel talks about are Russia, Iran, Turkey, and Syria. And then it tacks on, which is amazing to me, tacks on Sudan. A lot of translations say Ethiopia, but the correct reading of what they called Ethiopia back was technically Sudan and Libya. And don't you know that Sudan and Libya are both allied with that bloc, that Russian bloc that includes Turkey, Syria, and Iran. And this is why this is also important, is because, as we all know, Israel is coming down like a hammer on an anvil on Hamas, and we won't get into all that. But how long are these countries going to stand by? Because they're just chomping at the bit to attack Israel. They don't need an excuse. They've been wanting to do it for quite a while. Iran in particular. Russia is not overly eager, but Russia definitely sees a lot of the resources that Israel has, and Russia needs financial resources. They have a lot of their own, but they can always use a lot more. And they want to be big players in that region. So all it's going to take, from my reading, and I'm not saying that how I read it is exactly right, but just as somebody who studied those two chapters, all it's going to take now for those two chapters to explode into reality is one little spark. All it's going to take is for Syria. Look, Israel has already said this week that if Hezbollah gets into the war, Israel said they will wipe Damascus off the face of the earth. Isaiah 17:1 prophesies that at some point in one night, Damascus will be wiped from the face of the earth. That's never been fulfilled. And now you have this big conflagration, And they, by the way, they brought in all kinds of munitions into Damascus. So all it's going to take is for one missile or one bomb to hit the wrong place, and that city is going to go. And it may just be that the Israelis use a tactical nuke on it. They're adamant that if Hezbollah gets involved, then Damascus will be eliminated. Damascus, of course, being the strong capital of the Assad regime in Syria. And so once, if that were to happen, that would very easily trigger an invasion from the north, which is what Ezekiel 38 talks about. And that sets up an invasion of Israel, which appears, according to the reading, to subdue Israel. Israel then is kind of on the, what's the best way to put it? They're subdued is really the best term, which is going to involve apparently some sort of occupation and quite conceivably the rise of the Antichrist. That's how all this, you can't just take Thessalonians or just take Ezekiel or just take Matthew. You have to put them all together and blend them all together. And it seems like all of them have come together at once. And this stuff can easily happen. It's the convergence of all these other things that are going on at the same time. It's really, it's mind blowing. It's alarming and exciting at the same time if you're a Christian.
Yeah, I was just writing down that and it all goes along with everything else that's been happening, everything else that's been ramping up lately, and just it's all coming to that peak, it's all coming to that point, it's coming to the end, and this is really like you said, it's exciting because this is really what it's all about for Christians.
Right.
This is it. We're about to go home. We're on the cusp. We're on the edge. We are if you, I mean, you should be ready and waiting. You should be wanting Jesus to appear at any second. If he appeared right now,
Oh yeah.
I'm gone. I'll see you. You can have this world. If you want it, hopefully you don't want it. Hopefully you want God and Jesus in heaven. But I don't know. I just this. I know I said it before, and I think it bears repeating. This just feels different, and it's I'm not excited about the war. I'm not excited about what's going on over there. I'm not excited about women and children getting slayed in the streets. That's despicable. That is terrible. I just that's but it all lines up with prophecy. Unfortunately that's it lines up with prophecy, and it's not that God wants that. That's just the evil in the hearts of men that lead to that. That's the devil behind that one faction that's doing all of that, and it's just I don't know. I have no words for that. I just
Right.
I don't know how to articulate how disgusted I am by everything that I'm hearing about all of that, especially that verse with the women and children. It's just it pains me, to hear that going on, and but at the same time, I'm ready. I'm ready for the end. I'm ready to go home, and I'm excited. I'm almost giddy with excitement about getting to go home, about seeing Jesus come through the clouds. The disciples thought that they were going to get to see the return of Jesus, the second coming, but to just they're way more deserving than I am to witness such a awesome event. But here I am, just we get to see it, and it's
Right.
mind blowing how awesome it's going to be. You try to think about what it's going to be like, but you can't. I'm just waiting. I'm ready. But like you said, it's like everything is leading to this moment, or leading to that moment. Everything is coming to a point, and like it says in what Matthew 21 verse 28, when these things begin to take place, and they're beginning to take place. I don't
Yeah.
think there's any question
Right.
that it's starting to take place. Stand up and lift your heads, and stand up and lift up your heads, because your redemption is drawing near. Those are Jesus's words. Those are those red letters in the Bible I get excited to see when I'm reading, because Jesus is about to speak, and that's coming from him. That's not coming from me or Jerry. That's coming from Jesus.
It's very much like an onion, to be perfectly honest, because all this stuff is, there's a historical context for it. A lot of this has already occurred, but yet it's going to happen again. There are echoes. For example, Israel being surrounded by armies. This occurred in 70 AD when Israel was sacked by the Romans and destroyed, and they were scattered throughout the world. But this was a precursor, and the Antiochus Epiphanes, the Greek leader who is mentioned heavily in the book of Daniel, he carried out a lot of the stuff that you see in the book of Daniel. But yet these things are all shadows. They're echoes of what's coming. We are once again, probably not the church, but mankind will once again see Jerusalem surrounded. And Jesus made very clear that when you see Israel surrounded, to flee, and to flee quickly, and he said, you don't have time to waste. You've got to go. And it talks about in Revelation that they will have we don't know exactly where, but somehow there's going to be a place of safety for Israelis to go to. Now, not all Israelis, because a lot of Israelis aren't going to know to flee. And I think what we're going to see, Jeff, I honestly believe, and we probably won't see it. The world will, but we probably won't. We may. I don't know. I don't have the timeline. You can only try to evaluate. But I think what we've seen the past week is just a tiny taste of what's going to happen to Israel as this stuff plays out. When the Antichrist, and the Bible makes it very clear, when he gets into that temple or the holy place, whichever it is, whether it's the Temple Mount, whether it's an actual temple, when that man stands up there and proclaims himself as God, whether he's proclaiming himself as the Mahdi, the Muslim Messiah, or whether he's proclaiming himself as the Jewish Messiah, whatever he's proclaiming, when he gets up and does that, things are going to get bad real fast, because that will be the clue, that will be the cue for the great attack upon the Israelis, who will be very vulnerable because they will have been subdued in this conflict. And what you're going to see is what we saw last Saturday, Sunday, times 100, because it'll be the whole country, not just a few towns near Gaza. And it's going to be so bad that Jesus warned them it'll be worse than anything that's ever happened to Israel. And so I don't know for sure. A lot of Christians go around saying that the church will be gone by that, the rapture will have occurred by that point. But for those who are interested, I've often wondered if it would be worthwhile to go and have have a channel with deep dives into this stuff, because it is very interesting. But you find 10 different people and you're going to get 7 different views on something. It shouldn't be that way, because the Bible is fairly specific, but yet it is that way. And it prevents us from honing in, because see, the purpose of prophecy is not to tell us what's going to happen, because if that was the purpose, it would be much clearer than it is. The purpose of prophecy is to bring glory to the Lord once it does happen. And people will look at it and see, well, gee, it said it right here all along. And that'll bring glory to the Lord, because it says the Lord sees the end from the beginning. And some people get that confused and say, well, the Lord sees the beginning from the end. Well, we all do that. It's not hard to see the beginning from the end. That's just a matter of looking back. But the Lord sees the end from the beginning. And so he's prophesied all these things. Just the birth of Israel itself, Israel being brought back from all the countries of the world and made a country again. That's never happened before. I mean, to not be a country and then be brought back from the 4 corners and be made into a nation, it's amazing. And the Bible specifically says it's going to happen, and it happened. It's unbelievable. And the same thing with the book of Daniel is so accurate that people now insist that it had to have been written after the fact. But they got their bubble burst when they recently found the book of Daniel in with a bunch of very ancient manuscripts proving that Daniel was in fact written beforehand. And that's how accurate it was, predicting Alexander's empire would be divided into 4, exactly as happened, that Alexander would die young. There it is right there. It talks about the sacking of Rome in detail. So all these things, it's very interesting, and it's more interesting now for the very fact that it's being played out during our time.
You mentioned echoes in the Bible and things that have taken place before that are kind of precursors to what's going to happen. And I think Sodom and Gomorrah is a very good example of the church age coming to, or an echo of the church age coming to a close. And the angels went in and they warned Lot and they warned the believers to get out, and they were safely removed from Sodom and Gomorrah before the destruction. I think that's all just a precursor, or I keep saying precursor. Well, I guess it could be called precursor, and an echo of the rapture before the tribulation, because we're being warned. These are all warnings. These are all signs. The prophecies are coming true, and prophecies, are there to. We. I know you said that it's not trying to tell us what's going to happen, but if we
Right.
take them as warnings, because like you said, the book of Daniel pretty much described all of that stuff before it happened to the point where they tried to convince themselves, they tried to convince everybody that it was written after the
Right.
fact. So with Sodom and Gomorrah and everything, I just think that is a sign of the rapture, because the people were warned. We're being warned now with everything that's going on and all the prophecies starting to come true. We can take those as warnings, and we should be taking those as warnings of what's about to happen. Jesus's words, from what I just read in Luke, he's telling the prophets what's going to happen at the end of
Right.
days. So if you can read Luke chapter 21, or Luke 21 chapter 20 through 28, and I recommend that everybody does that, and you aren't alarmed at how accurate that is at what's playing out right now, you don't see that as a warning, you probably need to reevaluate a few things. And it also talks about people fleeing from Jerusalem, from Israel, when everything's about to happen. And obviously, with Lot getting out and all the believers getting out, they were all saved. And that was God pulling them out of Sodom and Gomorrah, just like Jesus is going to pull us out of the
Right.
earth before the tribulation. So
And
everything
that's not
that's.
just.
Sorry, go
Go ahead.
ahead.
I'm sorry.
No,
No, that's not. And
I was finished anyway.
that's not just wishful thinking or making a connection on your part. When you compare it to the flood and Sodom and Gomorrah, there it is right there, Luke chapter 17 and verses 26, 27, 28. Jesus tells them, as it was in the days of Noah, so it shall be at the coming of the Son of Man. And then it says, it was the same as happened in the days of Lot. They were eating, they were drinking, they were buying, they were selling, they were planning, they were building. But on the day that Lot went out from Sodom, it rained fire and brimstone from heaven. It will be just the same on the day that the Son of Man is revealed. So when you say that, people think, oh, well, maybe it is, maybe no. Jesus said it'll be just like the flood. It'll be just like Sodom and Gomorrah. So that we know that those were echoes, those were precursors, those were examples. And Peter says that Sodom and Gomorrah suffered that fate as an example to all of us of what happens to those who live ungodly lives, who indulge the flesh and live corrupt lives. That when wickedness to that degree is paraded out in public, you're it's going to come down. The hammer is going to come down. The Lord made that very clear, and we've been doing that now for quite a while. So it's not exactly shocking that we're about to see some judgment. We're seeing earthquakes are off the chart. I mean, it's amazing. This is not a major story. You would think that the environmentalist crowd would be very much into talking about all the earthquakes because it's a big deal. It makes you wonder, why is it that they're not talking about the earthquake? Because they're everywhere, happening all the time in diverse places, just like Jesus said, and they're getting worse and worse. So all these things are taking place at the same time. It's like you said, not just that, but you have the the sea, which is definitely used as an analogy, as a symbol of mankind, because the beast of the end is talked about coming up out of the sea. And it's not so much that this empire is going to come out of the ocean itself, but it comes out of the sea, which represents the people. Revelation does this on several different things. Stars representing angels is another huge one that you see a lot. There's not a whole lot of these symbolic uses, and we're not always sure exactly why the Lord chose to use them, but there are distinct ones, and those are some of the ones that you definitely see. But it's I hand it back over to you, but that's all this stuff. It connects in. It's, if anybody likes a Rubik's cube, they would really enjoy the Bible prophecy, because it's very much a challenge. But like so many other things, when you have success and you begin to see and you figure things out, the Lord showing you things, it's kind of addictive, because you then want to do more.
It's always good when you're making theories and starting to connect the dots, and you theorize what you're thinking, and have Jesus back you up on it. That just
Yeah.
yeah. So I mean, what more can you need? Don't take my word for it.
Right. Exactly.
Jesus said it himself about the flood, about Sodom and Gomorrah, and it's starting to get like it was in the days of Noah. Look, just look around. Turn the news on for 5 minutes. Turn it on for 10 seconds. It's crazy just how bad it's really getting out there if you pay attention. And you mentioned the earthquakes. They're not just small earthquakes either. They're getting
Huge.
bigger and bigger and bigger. Weren't there right after this war started? It's like the day of, or the night,
Yeah.
that night there were like two or three big earthquakes in that region.
The one hit Afghanistan and killed thousands of people again after having done so just a couple weeks before.
Yeah, and that's talked about in prophecy. It's talked about how there will be earthquakes,
Right.
and you know, I just it just feels so different. It's like, we talked about this before, and we talked about the war in Israel being on the verge of happening, and it being surrounded, and before the war started, you look at all this stuff, and it's like, right, this is happening, check it off the list. This is happening, check it off the list. But then you still have several other things that need to happen first before Jesus can come back. And this is a big one.
Yeah. Yeah.
That This is a huge one that has been checked off. And
Yeah.
there's not much left to happen. We're here. We're at the end. It's gonna happen. And I'm pretty excited about watching Jesus ride through those
Sure.
clouds.
And all we can do at this point, from where we go from here, because whenever you're dealing with the Middle East, um, you have to kind of tread lightly, because no region of the world can have flare ups and then fizzle quite like the Middle East has been able to over the decades. I do agree, though, this is not just your average, ordinary flare up, but still, we're just not going to know, because so many people over the past week are asking, what this means. What does this mean? What is this? Is this, something significant? Well, yes, it's significant for sure. What it means, we really don't know, and we won't know. We're going to have to let it play out. And as days, I'm talking about days, not months or years. Over the coming days, weeks, there will be developments, and either this thing will fizzle, which I do not think it will, or it will intensify and go off the rails, and then we'll see something really a big deal. And but even if it seems to pass, I truly believe, from a reading of the prophecies and whatnot, that it'll only be a fizzle just for a few months at the most. We're in that season. There's a big deal. I don't know if we talked about this on this channel or not, but the UN meeting that occurred in late September, when they were all literally saying, peace and safety. Even Netanyahu was up there in front of the UN talking about peace and safety. What did Jesus say? When they say peace and safety, then sudden destruction will come upon them, and they will not escape. 2 weeks after they were all saying peace and safety, you got destruction, you got war, you got unbelievable chaos going on. It didn't take long. Now all the peace and safety they were talking about has gone by the wayside. But what's interesting about it, and I can't, this is an amazing mystery. We like mysteries on this channel. Here's one that doesn't involve cryptids, but it's every bit as mysterious. They had that UN conference in September. It was so talked about. It was supposed to be this big thing. They were going to pass this 7-year, they were going to confirm, they were going to strengthen, their words, the 7-year 2030 agreement, the climate agreement. They got up there, they had all sorts of meetings and whatnot. And then at the end, they passed some support for tuberculosis or tuberculosis research. And then they all went home. You cannot find anywhere. It's like it's been blacked out or wiped. You cannot find what they finally passed any resolution on. Surely they did. It's hard to believe they all just would have left without passing any resolution for the 2030, which is 2030. I mean, they're just absolutely smitten with the 2030 agenda. It's hard to believe they all left and went home without passing something. But yet, if you do a search, you cannot find anything on the internet about what came out of the 2023 UN summit. Nothing, except one little blurb about tuberculosis. So my question is, what did they pass? Did they pass anything? It's hard to believe they didn't. And if they did, why is it a big secret? Jeff, it's one of the most bizarre things that I've ever seen. It's strange. It's very strange. And it's right out there in plain sight. And yet nobody is asking what came out of the 2023 UN summit. It's a big deal. They talked about it for a month leading up to it. And then they had it and they all went home and nothing more was said. It's almost like something was passed they don't want anybody to know about. And so I think that also has definite prophetic implications. So there's a lot to be, we'll just have to wait and see. As far as we're learning with every event that plays out, we're learning. Like you said, Jeff, I didn't even really think about it, but it's true. You can, when it comes to these prophecies, a lot of times, what we don't know is how close to get to them or how far back to stand from them. A good example of this is like when you're talking about when Jesus said, there will come a time when they will kill you and they'll think they're doing a good service by killing you. Talking to the Jews, that clearly could apply to the Holocaust, could also apply to last week when these people were. So we don't know necessarily how big the Lord was talking, because some of these prophecies have already been fulfilled depending upon how wide a spectrum you're looking at. And I think sometimes we tend to look for a huge universal view when sometimes the Bible may be a lot more succinct. And it's probably true the other way around as well, where we see something small and think, well, this has to be it, when actually the Bible's talking about something much larger. That's what I mean about all we can really do is know what the Bible says, watch what's going on, know that the Bible assures us that we are not appointed to wrath. His people are not appointed to wrath. No Christians should be afraid of what we're talking about. I mean, I'm amazed at the Christians who just get pale sometimes and are afraid of all this because of what they've been told. But the Bible doesn't back that up at all. Like you said, Jeff, there's a lot of Christians who don't want to talk about this because they don't want the Lord to come back. They have big plans and they want these plans to come to fruition before the Lord comes back. Those things are more important than them being with Jesus. I think that's an extremely dangerous place to be. I understand if people are nervous because they have loved ones they want to get saved before he comes. I totally get that. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about folks who have careers or they have grandchildren or they have things that they want to enjoy first. They would rather the Lord wait and come back some other time. I think that's an extremely, if you look in, like we've said many times on this channel, you look in Revelation chapter 3 earlier, and the Lord does not like that, because you know what that is, Jeff? That's being carnal minded, and the Lord hates carnal mindedness. That's being focused on the things of the world and not looking to the things ahead. the spiritual things that he has in store for us. He wants us, we're supposed to look ahead at what he has planned when we're with him, not be focused on the here and now. And yet so many Christians are so focused on 2023 and their agenda and their plans, they don't want to hear about all this stuff because it cramps their style and their plans.
Well, it says over and over in the Bible, we should be watching, we should be looking to the skies, we should be waiting, and we should be ready. And what you just said is dead on because a lot of people aren't ready because they cling to things in this world. I have things I want to accomplish. I have dreams and, um, things I want to do. I'm sure you do too. But in the grand scheme of things, if it was between that and going to heaven, it's a no-brainer for me. I don't, none of that matters. Nothing in this world really matters except for getting right with the Lord and knowing Jesus and knowing God and trying to spread the gospel. That's what it's all about. People want to, what's the meaning of life? Save as many people as you can before the end. that to me is the meaning. That's why we're here. I I
And
just
ignorance of the Bible trips us up every time, because if these people knew that what they're experiencing here, what we're going through here is to prepare us for the millennium and for the Lord's reign. The Bible talks about that. So young people should not be upset because their lives are going to be cut short. Because if they're Christians, after the rapture and a brief period, the Lord returns with all his saints, and then you have earth as it should have been right from the beginning. And the things, the trials that we've gone through, the patience that we've learned, the scars that we've gone through, the things that we wondered about to build our character, to be sanctified, those things will help us as we are leaders in the Lord's kingdom, which the Bible says we will be. And so we're going through all this for a reason. And the Lord has amazing things planned still on the planet Earth. The term end of the world is the biggest misnomer of it's the end of the age. It's not the end of the world. The Bible describes there being at least 1,000 more years when Jesus comes down and takes over. Bible talks about that very explicitly. And even then, later on, there's more after that. So these folks that feel like, I don't know, it's kind of a hot button, you can tell with me, but I better digress before I say something I regret.
well, I love baseball. I love playing it. I love watching it, and I wonder if is there baseball in heaven. But if there's not, okay, I'm fine. you know, I'll take living in paradise for all eternity over my favorite sport, my beloved sport. I'm a huge tech junkie. I love technology and devices and things, and I'll leave it all behind. I'll leave it all behind. I don't care. Take me out of this house and leave everything in it. That's not flesh and blood.
Well, two things that should make everyone happy. First of all, the millennium, as the Bible describes it, is going to be much, much more like the current time than we really think. If you get down and read what it says, it's not. I heard some Christians the other day saying that there won't be fire and there won't be cooking and what the Bible doesn't say that at all. It talks about it being very similar to what it is. It's going to be like now, but take out the sin, take out the temptation, take out the devil, take out the killing, take out all the Satanism and the filth and the perversion. Take all that out. Imagine that Jesus ran the world, and that's what you have. There's still going to be human beings. There's still going to be countries. There's still going to be, that talks about people will be planting vineyards. There will be boats. It's going to be the world. It's going to be earth, and the people will be on it. And as for heaven, I don't know what kinds of things are in heaven, but one thing we do know is that people who have experienced it talk about unimaginable joy. So whatever brings you joy right now on this earth that you think you might miss, whether it's a hobby or whatnot, imagine the feeling you have at the best part of experiencing that. Times that by 100, having it never fade. That's what heaven's like. Unbelievable joy they talk about, that you're just aflame with good feelings and happiness. And it's just there's nothing here that you could ever experience that would rival it. We cannot conceive of it. It's very difficult for us to imagine that because it's so foreign to us. But those who have been there, and there's quite a few, maybe not all that claim, maybe there's some that are making things up, but I can tell you for a fact, they're not all making it up. Paul himself said he hinted that either he went up or somebody he knew. He said, I knew a man who went to the third heaven. And he talks about amazing experience. So either way, whether it's the millennium or heaven, it's going to be amazing.
Yes, it is. One thing that always sticks out to me about these people who have near death experiences or they go to heaven is they always talk about the colors they see, colors we couldn't even imagine here on Earth, and that's one of the sticking points for me. It's like we've talked about cryptid stories and how the same things pop up in each story, the same little details.
Right.
That's just one of the details that pops up in just about every single story. Is they're so amazed by these colors that they've never seen, and they come back and they're like, I can't even describe what that color is, you know. So that to me is just another little sticking point there that just makes me believe even more. But
Yep.
earlier you mentioned like the earthquakes happening, and that's prophesied and said to happen. And you said that you would think that they'd be using it like the climate change people. You think they'd be trying to use that to pass all these climate change bills and global
Right.
warming stuff and look at Mother Earth, she's angry and she's fighting back and stuff like that, but they don't talk about it. They don't ever talk about the earthquakes or anything, natural phenomena that are going on, but you'd think they'd be all over it. And I think one reason why is because the enemy has gotten so far. He's wrapped himself up in these people so far that he's afraid that if they talk about it, then it's going to bring to light that this is all prophecy. Earthquakes and everything is all prophecy because Jesus said it himself. He's the one who talked about the earthquakes. So it that's just my theory on it. You know, that's just something that came to mind when you were talking about it earlier, and I made a note about it here. But yeah, I didn't mean to change the topic from what we were talking about to
No, it's
go
true.
about stuff like
And
that. But
because they do talk about the fires. And if you really look, the fires are not part of what is mentioned. The fires that we see, whether it's Hawaii, whether it's Canada, whether it's Australia, those types of fires are not really mentioned anywhere. Fire is talked about as a general term, but the fact that there will be fires breaking out is not mentioned. You have earthquakes, you have raging of the sea, you have the sun and moon turning dark at some point, and then you have war in heaven. But the fires are not mentioned, and they do like to bring the fires up, the environmentalist crowd, which makes you wonder. Earthquakes really are not man-made. I think we can all agree. Fires, however, can be man-made. And I think I'm not going to go there. I don't want to be a conspiracy theorist, but you can kind of read between the lines at what I'm saying. If you don't want to draw attention to earthquakes because it clearly would make people see, okay, well, that's what the Lord said in prophecy, then you can point to something else that we can make that also is very convincing as a climate disaster. And that could be anybody can strike a match and cause a fire. I'm not saying that's what happened necessarily in Hawaii, although we do know in Australia and some of the ones in California have been the cases of arson. So, but I don't have all the facts to really say a lot about the fires other than the raging bonfires, like not bonfire, raging wildfires are not mentioned in scripture.
well, I guess you mentioned the war in heaven. I guess that's the last thing, right?
Yep, and that's a big one.
That's the one. After that is when that's what kicks it all off. So
Right.
I guess if we're going down the checklist of all the things, then unless it is actual the raging of the waters and the waves in the seas and the oceans,
Right. And see, we have no
then
idea, Jeff, what that looks like. We don't know what war in heaven looks like. All we know is that Jesus said that man's hearts will be failing them because of what it looks like. And so it's anybody's guess as to how visible it will be, how it will look. We just don't know. What we do know is for a fact that it will result in Revelation 12 with Satan and his angels being cast out of heaven down to earth. Now, they currently have free reign of earth, but they can also leave and go to the second heaven, the third heaven. But they're going to be subjected, reduced to just being on earth. And at that point, Revelation makes clear that Satan will be furious, and that's when he will turn his wrath on who? The Israelis. And that's when you're going to see what we talked about earlier, with a time like there's never been before. And I think a murderous bloodbath that will make what we saw last week look tame.
Yeah, it's like you said about heaven. We just cannot conceive of what it will be like. Well, the war in heaven, that's why people will be stricken with fear, will be panic and chaos will ensue, because we're going to be looking up and seeing a war going on, and then see the devil and his army cast down. And it's just something like we can sit here and talk about it. And you can like imagine, like when I think of seeing, when I think of seeing the devil and his fallen angels cast down, I liken it to kind of like a meteor shower or something like that, like asteroids falling. But I'm sure that's just what my human mind comes up with, because that's all I've got to compare it to.
Right.
When in reality, I know that's probably not how it's going to be. I mean, it might be something similar to that, but I don't know. I can't.
You know why?
Why is that?
The reason why we don't have a description, I'm convinced. The reason why there's no word in there to tell us what to look for is because the church won't be seeing that. We can never get away from the fact that Jesus said that this is going to come upon mankind like a trap. When the day of the Lord happens, when the Lord appears, it's going to be like one of those bear traps snapping shut on an unsuspecting bear. Jesus said people would be going about their daily lives just like they are today, marrying, drinking, giving in marriage, building projects, and then bam, it's going to happen. So you can't have people fainting from fear at crazy stuff going on in heaven and them being surprised out of their minds. So clearly, if you put the model together and have the pieces resting on what has to, then the people seeing the stuff in heaven is likely to occur after the Lord appears in the sky and the rapture occurs, which the two go together. And then you have all these other things that daisy chain together that will lead to what we describe with them fainting from fear.
I mean, that makes sense. Makes perfect sense. Oh, you just mentioned something, and I had it, and I lost it. I was going to talk about it. That's why. Okay, I found it. That's why. You talked about it coming as a trap, or like a thief in the night, I think is the analogy used.
Yeah.
And that's why we need to be vigilant. That's why we need to be watching. That's why we need to be out there trying to warn others. We see the prophecy starting to be fulfilled. We need to talk about it.
Right.
And so we can, enlighten people, and so they won't be, so they can see it coming, so they will turn their heads up and watch the skies. So they will be looking for the return of Jesus and anticipate it. So they won't be caught like that, won't be caught like a thief in the night. So they won't be left behind, when we start talking about it, we start fitting all those puzzle pieces together. It's like, I'll bring him up since you haven't. It's like Steve Ishtal always says on his channel, you get those pieces and you bring them together, or
yeah.
you start putting them together, all those puzzle pieces. It just starts to form that picture of what's going to happen. And the more we sit here and talk about it, and the more the gift of discernment starts to take over and makes us see, it all just makes sense to me. And this war in Israel, it hit me harder than all the rest, if that makes sense. It was more impactful as I sit and watch what's going on around us, what's going on in the world, and I'm, have my head up and I'm looking toward the sky. And that to me was why I was not excited to talk. Well, I am excited to talk about it, but I was felt that sense of urgency to want to talk about it as quick as we could after it happened.
Well, Israel's the big barometer. I mean, Israel is the big time hand that you look at, the hour hand. It points to what is coming. Israel is the centerpiece, and it's like Israel's the football in the game, where you can't not pay attention to where the football is. That's because that's deciding what's going on. And that's the role that Israel plays. And I tell you, this stuff it's important. There were Christians when Rome was sacked, when Rome was surrounded in 70 AD, there were Christians who knew the book of Daniel and who had heard what Jesus said. There were Christians who saw the Roman legions beginning to surround Jerusalem. And they fled. Thousands of them fled and made their way to Greece. And they escaped the nightmare that followed, in which they guesstimate 1 million Jews were slaughtered by the Romans. And I don't want to get into details, but let me tell you what some of the stuff the Romans did rivaled what we saw last week. The Romans were not overly vicious on their own, but they had it with the Jews and their rebellions. And so, and a lot of it was just bad. But those Christians who paid attention and who remembered what Jesus had said and took the prophecy and the warning seriously, they escaped with their lives and ended up in Greece. And later on, even associated with Paul when with some of his churches, the churches that Paul had set up. It's an amazing story you don't hear much about. Yep.
Yet again, just another echo or precursor of what's about to happen in our lifetimes. I'm not saying it's going to happen next week. I'm not going to say it's going to happen 10 years from now, but I do believe it's going to happen in our lifetime, and everything that's happening out there just seems to point to that. Yeah. But that's all I had for this one. Did you have anything else you wanted to add before we close this one out?
Like you said, I think put it best. At any time, we could have more developments that will warrant us coming back on here and doing another one.
Oh, I fully believe we're going to have at least, if we're still around, at least 20 parts to this series, because it seems like, and we say this every single time. I'm sure we said it last episode. Pretty sure that something's going to happen, maybe even tomorrow, and we'll be right back with it. So stay tuned for part 8. Because it's coming at some point. It's not a matter of if, it's when. So, but we don't do this for the views or the likes or to try to get as many subscribers as possible. We're not trying to make money off this channel. We're not trying to get internet famous. We are just two regular guys who feel like the Lord has called upon to talk about some of these things that we talk about on this channel, and we're just watching and waiting, and we have our heads turned to the skies, and when stuff happens, we feel like the Lord puts it on us to come talk about it. It's like I said at the beginning, when I saw those Bible verses, I knew that's what I wanted to do this episode. As soon as I saw that those posts about the chapters or the verses in Luke 21, and it's just too big a coincidence to overlook. And the feeling I got when I saw those is kind of like the feeling, it's that swell of the spirit. And that's pretty much how we decide our topics on here. And sometimes we go way out in left field and talk about cryptids and aliens and stuff, but we do it because, especially topics like this, the important stuff, we do it because we feel like the Lord wants us to get the word out there, and He has called upon us to not in a prophetic type of way or anything like that, or we're just two regular guys, but we feel like Jesus called upon everybody in the Great Commission to go spread the word and spread the gospel, and we feel like we're part of that. I feel like it speaks directly to me when I read the Great Commission, so I feel like that's part of what God wants me to do. I feel Jerry obviously feels like that's what he wants you to do too. And that's why we're here, and that's why we do it. We don't try to make any money or anything like that or get famous. We don't care about any of that. We just want to get God's word out there, and if we can just save one person or get one person to rededicate their lives to the Lord, then we feel like we've done our job. So that's why we do it. I'm not sure what we're going to be doing in our next episode. We may very well be back with part 8 of this ongoing series, but if not, then we'll definitely have something for you, and part 8's definitely coming at some point. So we look forward to seeing you then, and thanks for watching. God bless.